Hey everyone, it's Katie, and I wanted to talk about something today that I think is an experience a lot of people have who are using naltrexone following the Sinclair method to cut back on drinking. And this topic was inspired from a call I had earlier this week with one of our members who has been on the method for a while and seen some changes, but it just feels like they've been stuck in a plateau on the method, and they're kind of having this mindset shift around where they see that they need to make some changes in what they're doing on the Sinclair method. And so what I wanted to talk about today is really around the experience of waiting for naltrexone to work. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people, and even I did this as well, they start on naltrexone and they kind of expect the medication to do all the heavy lifting. So they're compliant, they're taking the medication according to their doctor's instructions, following TSM, but then they're not really doing much else to change their drinking habits and really change their relationship with alcohol at the core. So what often happens, I've seen this over and over again with people I've worked with, is they start on the medication, maybe they see some early changes in their drinking, whether they see significant changes or subtle changes, but then over time they end up hitting this plateau. And it becomes really frustrating because they're following the protocol, they're taking the medication correctly, but they're not seeing the changes that maybe other people are seeing on the treatment. And so, of course, this can breed a lot of discouragement, frustration. People feel like it's not working for them. People can get jealous of other people who have, had success more quickly. But this is such a common experience, and I think that it's something that we need to be aware of as we go into the Sinclair method. And I often tell our members that, there's no race to extinction. This isn't about whoever can, get to their goals the fastest on the method. What this treatment is really about is making sustainable changes little by little over time so that you truly have changed your relationship with alcohol at the core. And you're a different person as it relates to alcohol. For example, you're no longer somebody who relies on alcohol to cope after a stressful day, or you drink every time you feel bored, or you just are a daily drinker starting at 5 o'clock because that's what you've always done. These are kind of automatic habits that can play out for a lot of people. But part of changing our relationship with alcohol, for most of us, I think on the method, our goal is to be a quote unquote normal drinker or a moderate drinker. And in order to be a moderate drinker, that probably means we're not drinking every day. We're probably drinking a couple or a few days a week, maybe having a few drinks when we drink, but we're not going overboard. So how does someone go from, in the case of the person I was talking to, and in my case as well, as someone who's a daily drinker, to someone who truly is that normal moderate drinker who can kind of take it or leave it and maybe has a couple drinks over the weekend and, not fussing about having more than that? How does somebody go from, that one type of relationship with alcohol to another? And I will say it's not by just waiting for naltrexone to work. Naltrexone is clearly a very powerful tool. I know that I would not be where I am today without that medication, because I tried to moderate, I tried to quit drinking so many times before I learned about the Sinclair method, and I failed at it every single time. Naltrexone was vital to really fixing my brain and the issue of alcohol addiction that was existing in my brain, and ultimately gave me back control over alcohol and just caused me to lose interest in alcohol. But there was so much more to it than just simply popping that pill an hour before drinking. And so, in the case of my client, what I've heard other people say is, and this is at no fault of their own, like this is a process where we have to kind of discover these things for ourselves. And this is such a common thing that a lot of people go through. So I'm talking about this not to be critical or say it's even wrong to approach TSM with this mindset, but just to really be aware of it, because, you might be someone who's in this place where you are relying on the medication, you're compliant, you're doing what the protocol says to do, but you're frustrated. You're not seeing the results that you had hoped for. And this is why in our program, what I often say is that we have to meet the medication halfway. Like naltrexone is a crucial component, but what I say is it's 50% of it. So the TSM protocol is half the battle. Without it, like I said, I really don't believe I'd be where I am today without TSM. But the other half of it is really how we engage the process and meet the medication halfway to mindfully and consciously change our habits, question our beliefs about alcohol and its role in our lives, and ultimately recognize that we can change the beliefs that we've had, and also recognizing that a lot of the beliefs we have are driving our behaviors and the way we drink alcohol. Oftentimes they're unconscious, or they've been there for years or decades, so maybe we're not even aware of them, and I'll talk more about that. And then also, of course, developing new coping skills. I really realized that I relied on alcohol as a crutch for 10 years. And so a way I like to describe this is that it felt like my coping muscle that I had, was very weak and feeble, because anytime I felt stressed, sad, angry, lonely, bored, really any uncomfortable emotion, I was always reaching for the drink or thinking, okay, as soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to go home and drink. So I was just completely relying on the alcohol and didn't really have other healthy coping skills I could rely on. So it was a process of unlearning alcohol as a coping tool and starting to learn other modalities to kind of get through the difficult things in life. And that didn't happen overnight. And it didn't happen because I was taking naltrexone before drinking. Taking naltrexone before drinking helped to quiet my craving for alcohol, and it gave me more mental space and clarity in order to think more clearly around, what I really wanted out of life, what type of relationship with alcohol I really wanted to have. And then I could take steps toward changing that. And I'm a big believer in doing things in really small ways so that you can just take baby steps week over week and month over month to make changes, helping them to be sustainable, and then they really add up in the long run. So if you're watching this and you feel like you're someone who's been compliant with the protocol and you feel like you're plateaued on the method, like you're thinking, okay, I'm taking naltrexone, I'm following the protocol, but how come I'm still drinking every day? Or how come I'm still drinking too much when I drink? Like, what's going on? I thought the medication was supposed to help with this. If you're in that situation today, I want you to know that naltrexone is probably doing more than maybe you recognize it's doing, especially if you've been on the method for a while now. But this is where you have an opportunity to come in and really ask yourself, what else am I doing besides taking this medication to really change the core relationship with alcohol so that I am someone who doesn't rely on alcohol to cope anymore. Maybe I, become someone who wants to have wine with my Italian dinner or beers with friends once in a while, but it's not a daily thing where I'm still dependent on it, even though I'm still, taking naltrexone. If this is you, I want you to be encouraged, because just because you feel like you've hit a plateau with naltrexone and TSM doesn't mean it won't work for you. What it means is that this is really your opportunity to take it to the next level and meet the medication halfway and engage in the protocol so that you can start to intentionally and consciously make these necessary changes that will ultimately help you get your control back over alcohol and be free from alcohol use disorder, and really put alcohol in its rightful place in your life so that you are truly in charge of your relationship and back in control. And one really significant way to do this that I think may be easily overlooked or underestimated by a lot of people is really getting to the core of the beliefs that we have about alcohol and alcohol's role in our life. Because when we have beliefs, they ultimately form our thoughts, and those thoughts form our daily actions and habits. And so a lot of times what I've seen with clients, and I honestly saw it with myself as well, people will have these unconscious beliefs about alcohol and its role in their life. And if this belief that they're carrying around, and I'll give you some examples, but just real quick, if this belief that they're carrying around is contradictory to, the future version that they see of themselves where they have control over alcohol, then what's going to happen is oftentimes they're just going to fight the medication. And even if they're following the protocol to a T, but they've still got these beliefs that are kind of operating under the surface, oftentimes what happens is they hit a plateau and they get really frustrated and just wonder, why isn't naltrexone working for me when it seems to work for everybody else? So just a couple examples of what those beliefs might be based on my beliefs that I had and what I've seen with other clients. One thing I believed that I didn't really recognize, but one of my beliefs I had was that anytime life got hard, there was a death in the family, stress at work or anything like that, I really believed that alcohol was the thing that I needed, like the literal experience of I need a drink. I realized partway through my TSM journey how much I was really walking around with this belief system that stressful events in life equaled a drink. Like I didn't know how to cope with stressful events outside of alcohol. And I remember clearly one day I had a bad day at work. I wasn't in a good mood and I was several months into my TSM journey and I was almost automatically just going to take the naltrexone and have some drinks to kind of get through it. And I realized, I had this light bulb moment where I realized, I don't really want to be somebody who needs to turn to alcohol whenever life gets hard. Like life is always going to be hard. There's good days, there's bad days, but you can never escape the challenges of life. And I realized in that moment that I don't want to be somebody who is dependent on alcohol just to get through an uncomfortable emotion. I wanted to be more resilient. I wanted to be somebody who had healthier coping skills that didn't rely on a substance to get through the challenges of life. And for me in that moment, that simple mindset shift and really an identity shift helped me to start working toward becoming the person that I really wanted to be, which at that time I didn't want to be alcohol free, but I didn't want to be relying on alcohol as a coping tool anymore. I didn't want to feel like I needed it because I really wanted to have my control back. I didn't want to have that chain with the alcohol that, oh my gosh, it's a bad day, I need to have a drink. And so in that moment, that was a mindset shift for me and an identity shift for me, but things didn't manifest immediately right after that. I was still kind of learning, okay, what does this mean to not rely on alcohol to cope? How can I learn new coping skills and try new things and gradually let go of alcohol as a coping skill? And a really practical way I did this is that each time I was triggered to drink and rely on alcohol to cope, I would give myself a chance to try something else first. So, stressful day at work, instead of racing home and taking naltrexone and drinking, I would force myself to go on a walk or go grocery shopping or go get a pedicure or watch some funny videos on YouTube or eat a meal or something like that. Another way that I thought in my mind, okay, in the future, this could potentially be a future coping tool or way for me to just escape or get my mind off things. So I would allow myself to do something else first. And then if after that I still wanted to drink, I would let myself drink. But I was trying to always be consistent around giving myself a chance to try to practice other coping skills. And again, I was only able to start being consistent with practicing these other coping skills once I had an identity shift and a mindset shift inside where I got clear on, I no longer want to be someone who's dependent on alcohol in this way. Instead, I want to be this type of person. And I had this vision of who I wanted to be. And that really helped me kind of work toward that and chip away at everything that wasn't that. Another example I want to give is from a client encounter I had several years ago where she was in a situation where she'd been on the medication for a while, had been compliant, but was totally stuck and about to throw in the towel on the naltrexone, kind of giving up, this isn't going to work for me. And on the coaching call, she said something that really struck me. She said, I love my bottle of red wine every night. What else would I do if I didn't have my bottle of red wine? It's my favorite ritual. She said something to that extent. And what I realized and what her and I discussed is that here she was taking naltrexone and doing TSM to drink less alcohol and cut back on her drinking, yet she had this conflicting belief inside where she loved that bottle of red every night. She loved that ritual. And who would she be if she didn't have that ritual? So as she was operating with that belief system inside, it was really conflicting with what naltrexone and TSM are supposed to do, because in her core, she didn't really, at that time at least, want to change anything about her drinking. She was truthfully content with having that bottle of red every night. And this isn't to say that's right or wrong. It's just to say where she was at in the moment. And what's really cool about beliefs and belief systems is that we can change them and we can choose to believe something else. And there's different techniques and strategies to do this. One of those is that I like to use in our program is to really turn your beliefs into a question. So for her in that example, I love my red wine ritual every night. I don't know who I would be without it. Okay, well, like asking yourself, do I really love it? And thinking it all the way through, maybe immediately, yes, it sounds nice in the moment, but what are the costs of it in the future? How do you feel the next day? In your heart of hearts, what's your long-term vision and desire for your relationship with alcohol? And so really this process is really a thought exercise for a lot of us who are on the Sinclair Method, where if you feel like you're being compliant and doing the protocol correctly, have you taken some time to do that inner inquiry to really identify some of the beliefs that you have that may be shaping your behavior? Another common one I hear from people is, those of us who would drink wine while cooking dinner. Like people say, I can't imagine cooking dinner without that glass of wine in my hand, or I can't imagine having an alcohol-free day, or I can't imagine socializing without drinking. All my friends are drinking. It's all what we do. I can't imagine doing that. And the thing is that belief may be true right now, and it's the belief that's gotten you to where you are. But as you start to recognize that, hey, these beliefs are there, first of all, that's the first step, is the awareness of them. The second step is to really realize that you can challenge them and you can change your beliefs so that you can cultivate beliefs that are really in alignment with, the reason why you went on TSM in the first place, the reason why you wanted to drink less in the first place. And it's not to dismiss that is an authentic feeling that you have right now. For example, I can't imagine cooking dinner without having a glass of wine. That's a really common one. But just to recognize that, okay, that's how I feel right now, but not everyone has to cook dinner with a glass of wine. In fact, I know a lot of people that cook dinner without wine. So, objectively, I know it's possible. So how can I then become someone who can cook dinner without having to have a glass of wine every night? And when you start to ask yourself these questions, your brain looks for an answer to it. And you start to think of different ways to get out of habitual patterns around drinking and try other things. I've had clients that they have that belief about the wine, cooking dinner with wine. Maybe first they have a glass of sparkling water and then they work toward the wine, or they allow themselves to have wine with dinner instead of feeling like they need to have the glass with the time or during the time that they're cooking. And so this isn't about, making a massive change out the gate and trying to be perfect out the gate. It starts with really understanding, like, if you're in a place where your behaviors and your relationship with alcohol are not where you want them to be, again, in your heart of hearts and your core, it's probably because you have some underlying beliefs that may very well be unconscious that are just driving your behaviors. And what I found is if you can identify those beliefs that are not in alignment with where you want to be, that's where you can start chipping away at them and forming new beliefs and ultimately forming a different identity, realizing, I don't want to be someone who has to drink wine every night when I cook dinner. Like, that's a dependency I don't want to have. And to be honest, this process can be a little bit scary. Like, I've heard people say, I don't know who I would be if I didn't drink every day or if I didn't drink in this setting. And so honoring that and recognizing that, and that's why I'm a huge fan of just making small little changes over a long period of time. But the key really is with consistency. I often equate TSM to like a weight loss journey where you're losing a pound a week. It feels like nothing's happening. You're putting in all the work and you're not seeing a lot of change. But if you're consistent with it, the weight starts to come off for most people. And that's true with TSM as well, especially because it's a long-term treatment protocol. It can feel like not a lot is changing, but for you to really not underestimate the work that you're doing when you're questioning those beliefs, when you're thinking about new beliefs that you want to adopt, and when you're thinking about, taking on a different identity. Like, do you still want to be someone who's a wine lover, or somebody who, needs to drink beer every time I do this occasion with my friends? Or, I'm somebody who, whenever I'm bored, I always open up a bottle of wine, or whenever my spouse is gone, I'm always drinking and getting drunk. Like all of these ways that we have identified with alcohol for years or decades, those are kind of deep-seated beliefs that continue to drive our behavior. So as you start to question these beliefs, that's where the change can really happen. Again, another client of mine, they play tennis, and they always have drinks afterwards with all of their friends. And so she was planning an alcohol-free day on TSM, and she was like, oh, I can't have an alcohol-free day on that tennis match night. Like, there's no way. That's not what we do. And she caught herself and was like, well, why not? Like, why can't I have an alcohol-free day? Yeah, it's what we always do, but it's going to be late. Like, I can have an alcohol-free day. And just that one little change in that moment of her kind of recognizing this unconscious automatic belief that I can't have an alcohol-free day in this setting, and her kind of stopping that belief and saying, well, actually, yeah, I can. And she ended up doing it. I mean, that is a huge step and a huge win in really shifting our relationship with alcohol and how we relate with alcohol and the role that it's playing in our life. That is really how we get our control back, is in those little moments where the decisions seem insignificant. You know, oh, I'm going to play tennis. I always drink after tennis, but opting to not do that, that is where the change happens, when we do that stuff with consistency. For most of us, it's not an overnight change. It's not like a light bulb moment where all of a sudden we feel like we're back in control of our drinking. It's almost like we have to earn that control back. We have to reclaim that control back. And naltrexone is a really powerful tool, because if you guys are anything like me, trying to control or moderate drinking before naltrexone was just like impossible. Like, I would say I was gonna have 2 drinks, but almost always went overboard. But with naltrexone, I was able to have more control, have more clarity, have more just ability to think through, you know, okay, I want to drink tonight, but should I? Because I wanted to have an alcohol-free night and I have this going on tomorrow. That all becomes more possible with naltrexone, because we're not just fighting a craving every single day. But it does require us to engage, you know, engage consciously, engage with more mindfulness. Again, doing that inner inquiry to question our beliefs, to shift our identity. And then also, you know, institute the habit change and coping skills change that all comes from that. But I really do believe, you know, the change starts in our mind. It starts with our beliefs. If we're out there just trying to like have 2 alcohol-free days and it's really, really hard, it's probably because, you know, maybe we haven't been on naltrexone long enough, and or maybe because we've got these unconscious beliefs that are driving us to, you know, have the type of relationship with alcohol we've had in the past, but it's not lining up with this new relationship with alcohol that we want to have. And that's an exercise we have in our program, which I think can be really helpful, just to get clearer on the vision you have for your future self. What is your ideal relationship with alcohol? It might change, you know. For some people, I hear their initial goal is, I just don't want to black out anymore. I don't want to have hangovers anymore. I want to have 2 alcohol-free days in a week. Like, you don't have to have this perfect vision right out the gate of like, oh, I'm just a perfect moderate drinker, you know. It's starting where you are, but having that vision of like, okay, what's the next phase I want to work toward? And there's also benefit, of course, to having like a long-term goal of what your, you know, end result is for your ideal relationship with alcohol and TSM. So holding that vision in the future, but also just having realistic kind of milestones that you can work toward for where you are right now, kind of meeting yourself where you're at on TSM right here, right now. So I hope this video is helpful. It wasn't as organized as I wanted it to be, but it was just on my mind and my heart, this idea of, you know, people who often just rely on naltrexone exclusively and wait for the medication to work. I honestly did that as well. And a few months into TSM, I realized that there was more to it than just taking the pill. And I actually had to start going to a therapist and making some pretty major changes in my life that were kind of driving my excessive drinking habit. So it's okay to be in a place where you do that. It's a valuable learning experience to kind of rely on the pill and then realize, oh, there's more to it than just that. But I think once people start to realize that, okay, the naltrexone's working, but like I need to, you know, meet the medicine halfway, this is where the opportunity comes in, I believe, to really start kind of questioning those beliefs we have and those automatic thoughts that are playing out, so that we can start to question them and ask ourselves if they're true. Like, oh, it's 5 o'clock. I need to have wine at 5 because I always drink wine at 5. It's like, well, do I? And even just starting to ask yourself, regardless of the outcome, that's really going to help you to shape not only your internal beliefs and your identity that you have around alcohol. It's going to help you make it to be what you really want it to be in order to cultivate that future relationship with alcohol that you want to have. But then that will also manifest into the habits that you're doing and the coping skills that you're trying, and really becoming someone who is truly empowered over alcohol, and really understanding, again, why you started the method in the first place, and where you'd like to be in your ideal relationship with alcohol. This is a process. It's not an overnight thing. It can feel maybe like your ideal relationship with alcohol is still a million miles away. But that's where kind of meeting yourself where you're at, setting goals that are realistic for where you're at, and just doing it with consistency, baby steps with consistency, really helps to make this change sustainable. All right, I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have questions or comments. Please drop them below. Reach out. Contact information is in the description box. I will talk to you guys again soon. Bye.